Imagine standing at the edge of the Sahara, where waves of golden sand stretch endlessly to every horizon. The air hums with silence, as if the earth itself is holding a secret too ancient to tell. But what if this endless desert wasn't always a desert at all? What if, beneath those dunes, lies the memory of a vanished world, a land of rivers and gardens, cities of stone and light, where a civilization far older than Egypt once thrived, and then disappeared, swallowed whole by shifting sands. Tonight, we'll travel deep into the heart of that mystery. We'll explore ancient maps that show lakes where there is now only dust, rock formations that look eerily like temples, and myths that speak of kingdoms turned to sand overnight. So, dim the lights, let your mind drift back through time, and if you enjoy exploring the forgotten chapters of human history, remember to subscribe to History Secrets for Sleep, where every story uncovers another mystery buried beneath our feet. Long before the Sahara became a sea of silence, it was alive. Not in the faint, fragile way of cacti and wind, but bursting with life. Picture this: vast grasslands stretching to the horizon, hippos bathing in rivers, elephants roaming through forests, and rains that painted the dunes green. This isn't a fantasy. It's what scientists now call the Green Sahara period, a time when what we see as the largest desert on Earth was once one of its most fertile regions. Around 10,000 years ago, the Earth tilted just slightly, enough to change everything. Monsoon patterns shifted, pulling moist air deep into North Africa. Year after year, rain returned to the Sahara. The sands hardened into soil. Lakes formed, enormous ones, like Lake Megachad, once larger than the Caspian Sea. And where today we find endless dunes, people built homes, tended cattle, and carved rock art that still survives. Scenes of hunters, swimmers, and mysterious rituals. Archaeologists exploring sites like Tassili Najer in southern Algeria were stunned when they found thousands of ancient paintings covering the canyon walls. Men dancing beside giraffes, women surrounded by fish, strange, round-headed beings depicted with halos and elongated limbs. The art was so vivid, so full of detail, that Henry Lotte, who studied it in the 1950s, called it a prehistoric Sistine Chapel. But who were these people, and how advanced were they? Some say they were nomads, early pastoralists who followed the water. Others believe they were the remnants of something far greater, a forgotten civilization that thrived when the Sahara was green. One that built cities now buried beneath the sand. Satellite images from NASA have revealed ghostly outlines of what might be ancient riverbeds, and even structures, grids and shapes that seem too deliberate to be natural. The sands conceal, but they do not forget. Beneath them may rest the remnants of stone walls, temples, or even entire settlements. As the millennia passed, the rains began to fade. Slowly, the monsoon retreated south, leaving behind dry earth, dying rivers, and people forced to move or vanish. Within a few thousand years, the Sahara transformed from paradise to desolation. The animals disappeared, the people scattered, and whatever culture had flourished there, whatever stories they told, songs they sang, or knowledge they carried, was buried with them. Yet even as the desert claimed the land, it preserved its memories. Fossils lie perfectly intact beneath the dunes. Stone tools still glint in the sand when the wind blows just right. And every now and then, something extraordinary emerges. An artifact or carving that shouldn't exist, hinting that perhaps the Sahara's first inhabitants were more advanced than we've ever imagined. If that's true, then the question becomes, where did they go? Did they vanish? Or did they move, taking their wisdom with them, leaving behind only whispers in stone? From far above, the Sahara appears as a golden void, a colossal desert stretching nearly the size of the United States. But if you peel back the layers of sand, a different story emerges, one written not in dust, but in water. In the 1990s, a team of geologists studying satellite data made a startling discovery. Beneath the Sahara's endless dunes lies a vast network of ancient rivers, now dry, but once flowing strong enough to carve valleys hundreds of kilometers long. These weren't small streams, they were lifelines. They connected lakes, nourished forests, and may have sustained entire populations long before written history began. Modern radar imaging from NASA and the European Space Agency has revealed patterns that look unmistakably like the fingerprints of civilization. Deltas, basins, and branching waterways that hint at towns once built along their edges. In some regions, even the shape of vanished lakes can still be traced. Enormous bodies of water that shimmered under a different sky. One such feature, known as the Tamanrasset River system, is perhaps the most astonishing of all. Flowing once from the heart of the Sahara toward what is now Mauritania, it may have been as mighty as the Nile. Scientists believe that during the last Green Sahara period, this river carried rainfall from Central Africa to the Atlantic Ocean, creating fertile plains and wetlands across what's now barren sand. Imagine what that would mean, a Sahara not as a wasteland, but as a cradle of life. Imagine trade routes following the river's course, connecting inland cities with distant coasts. Imagine ships, primitive or advanced, drifting through lush valleys where now only wind blows. In certain rock shelters across the central desert, carvings depict strange, long boats. They seem out of place, hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean. Some scholars dismiss them as symbols or dreams, but others whisper that they might be memories, fragments of a time when the desert was alive and navigable. And beneath all of this, in the silence of the sand, still flows something very real. Hidden deep below the surface lies one of the largest freshwater reserves on Earth, the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System. It holds enough water to fill the Nile River for thousands of years. This vast, buried ocean suggests that the Sahara still remembers what it once was, a land of rivers, lakes, and civilizations that thrived beside them. But the greatest mystery is not just that water once flowed there. It's what might still lie buried beside those ancient channels, the remains of structures, cities, or technologies washed away by time. Some radar scans show geometric anomalies beneath the dunes, shapes that are too straight, too aligned, too deliberate. Could it be that when the climate shifted and the rivers dried, these people retreated underground? Or perhaps fled north, giving rise to the myths of Atlantis or early Egypt? The Sahara keeps her secrets well. The rivers may be gone, but they still whisper beneath the dunes, guiding those who listen towards something extraordinary waiting to be rediscovered. Before the desert swallowed their world, the people of the Green Sahara carved their lives into stone. Their art still clings to rock faces scattered across the desert, silent witnesses to a forgotten age. In the cliffs of Tassili Niger, the mountains of the Ahaga, and the plateaus of Chad, thousands of figures dance, hunt, and pray. Frozen in time, they are known simply as the Saharan ancients. We don't know what they called themselves, what language they spoke, or where their descendants went. Yet their paintings tell us they were not primitive wanderers. They were observers of the stars, domesticators of animals, builders of sanctuaries, people who understood both earth and sky. Some of the most haunting images show figures with large, rounded heads and elongated bodies, surrounded by dots, circles, and lines. Archaeologists call them the Roundheads. To some, they're depictions of shamans or deities. To others, they're something stranger, visitors, teachers, or beings not of this earth. But perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe these beings symbolized ancestors, or those who came before, a memory of another civilization that once guided them. Every culture carries a memory of its founders, after all. Egypt had Thoth, Sumer had the Anunnaki, Greece had the gods of Olympus. Perhaps the Roundheads were the Saharan equivalent, mythic echoes of real people long vanished. In the heart of the desert, archaeologists have found something else: finely carved tools, polished stone axes, and pottery decorated with spirals and geometric motifs. One piece of pottery found in Niger bears markings almost identical to designs seen in early Nile Valley cultures. Coincidence? Maybe. But maybe it's a thread, one that connects these vanished people to the dawn of Egyptian civilization. Some researchers, like the late Dr. Fabrizio Mori, believed the Tassili rock art might date back as far as 12,000 years, placing it at the edge of humanity's known history. If that's true, then these people were painting before the first pyramids, before Stonehenge, before writing itself. They were already expressing ideas of spirituality, society, and perhaps memory, things that define civilization. And then there are the faces. On certain sandstone walls, faint outlines of eyes, lips, and crowns appear. They're weathered by thousands of years of sandstorms, but still visible, hauntingly human. When the French archaeologist Henri Lot saw them in the 1950s, he wrote that they gave him the impression of beings from another world, yet intimately connected with ours. If they truly existed, if these people built communities, temples, or observatories, the evidence may now rest under hundreds of meters of sand. The Sahara has shifted countless times, burying entire valleys overnight. Still, every grain of sand carries a trace, a fossil, a tool, a fragment of pottery, waiting for someone to find it. And with every discovery, the mystery deepens. Who were the Saharan ancients? A forgotten tribe? Or the survivors of something far greater? If we could drain the Sahara of its sand, like pulling back the ocean, what would we see? Perhaps entire valleys, once lush and alive, now buried under ages of silence. Ancient lakes that shimmered beneath a gentler sun. And maybe, just maybe, the faint outlines of cities that the world has forgotten. When scientists mapped the Sahara using satellite radar in the early 2000s, they didn't just find dry riverbeds. They found what appear to be ancient lake basins, some as large as modern seas. The most famous of these is Lake Megachad, which once covered an area larger than Germany. For centuries, it provided life to animals and humans alike. A glittering heart in the middle of what we now call nowhere. But Megachad wasn't alone. To the north, near modern-day Libya, archaeologists studying radar data discovered another vast depression, the Fezzan Basin. Hidden beneath the dunes, its floor bears the ghostly signatures of human activity. Straight lines, geometric shapes, and what could be the ruins of ancient settlements. Then there's the Tassili Plateau, where certain satellite images show strange, rectangular patterns beneath the sand, not random, but aligned with the cardinal directions. Some dismiss them as geological quirks. Others suggest something more. One name that often surfaces in whispers and late-night research circles is the city of Zerzura, the White City of the Desert. Arab explorers wrote about it more than 1,000 years ago, describing it as a hidden oasis guarded by mysterious people with fair hair and blue eyes. Some claimed its streets were paved with marble, its wells lined with silver. For centuries, adventurers searched for it. Some returned empty-handed. Some never returned at all. The British explorer Ralph Bagnold, one of the first to cross the Libyan desert by motorcar in the 1930s, found ancient routes that seemed to lead nowhere, long-forgotten caravan paths half swallowed by sand. He suspected they were once trade routes, connecting lost oases that no longer exist. And along those paths, he found stone ruins, walls too deliberate to be natural, yet too ancient to date easily. Could Zerzura, or others like it, have been outposts of a much older civilization that flourished during the Green Sahara? Perhaps. The desert sands move slowly, like a living tide. What lies hidden today might reappear tomorrow, uncovered by a single storm. In 20 French researchers using ground-penetrating radar near the Gilf Kabir Plateau detected anomalies resembling buried structures, perfect right angles, arranged in rows. Their instruments couldn't confirm what they were, but one researcher remarked quietly, "It feels like the sand is hiding a story it doesn't want to tell." And maybe that's exactly what the Sahara is, a keeper of lost stories. Beneath its golden surface could rest the foundations of forgotten cities, temples aligned with vanished stars, and the graves of people whose names have long since faded from memory. If these cities existed, they might have been the first to witness the desert's slow death. Their fall would not have been sudden, but patient, inevitable, as rivers dried and rains failed. When the last waters vanished, so too did their world. But if there were survivors, where did they go? North to the Nile, west to the Atlantic, or deeper into the desert, carrying their secrets to the next age of man? The end did not come with fire or flood. It came quietly, like a candle dimming in a vast, endless room. Around 6,000 years before our time, the Earth's axis began to tilt once more, ever so slightly, just a few degrees, barely noticeable in the heavens. But in the Sahara, that tiny shift meant everything. The monsoon that had breathed life into the desert began to weaken. Rains grew shorter, then rarer, until they stopped altogether. The rivers that once roared like arteries of the land began to shrink. The lakes evaporated under the unrelenting sun. At first, the people stayed. They built their huts near the last pools of water, hoping the rains would return. But the clouds no longer came. Slowly, year after year, the land that had once been green and generous hardened into dust. Grasslands turned brown. Herds died. Villages were abandoned. Imagine standing there then, watching your world fade before your eyes. The air growing hotter, the soil turning to sand beneath your feet. Every horizon shimmering with mirages of water that no longer existed. By 4,000 years before the present, the transformation was complete. What had once been rivers became dry valleys. What had been forests became dunes. The Sahara, once the beating heart of life, became a graveyard of memories. Some of its people may have journeyed north, following the traces of water to the Nile Valley. There, new kingdoms would rise: Egypt, Nubia, Kush. Civilizations that seemed to appear from nowhere, already bearing the skills of irrigation, astronomy, and architecture. Could they have been the descendants of the Green Sahara's lost inhabitants? It is a question that lingers in the wind. Others may have gone west, toward the Atlantic coast, or south, deeper into Africa's interior. Even today, ancient oral traditions from Mali, Niger, and Mauritania tell stories of ancestors who came from the north when the sky stopped raining. The Tuareg people, known as the Blue Men of the Desert, carry legends of a time when their forebears lived in gardens beside flowing rivers, before the sands arrived. For centuries, the Sahara has continued its slow, patient expansion, swallowing whatever remains of that vanished paradise. Sandstorms move mountains of dust each year, covering valleys, erasing evidence, hiding the bones of a forgotten past. Yet sometimes, the desert gives something back. A storm reveals the corner of a wall, a fragment of pottery, or the bleached skeleton of an animal that once grazed on grass. Each discovery is a whisper, a reminder that the Sahara was not always what it seems. And so, the Green Sahara slipped away, not destroyed, but transformed. Its people scattered, its rivers buried, its memory fading beneath the dunes. But deep beneath the surface, the land still remembers. Beneath those silent sands lie fossils of fish, seeds of long-dead trees, and the outlines of ancient lakes that once reflected the stars. The Sahara became a desert, but before that, it was something far greater, perhaps even the cradle of a forgotten civilization whose echoes still shape the world we know today. In the heart of Mauritania, where the desert stretches endlessly toward the horizon, there lies a formation so vast it can only be truly seen from the heavens. Astronauts aboard the earliest Gemini missions in the 1960s first spotted it, a perfect spiral, over 25 miles wide, carved into the barren earth like a fingerprint of the gods. They called it the Richat structure. The locals, though, have long had another name for it: the Eye of the Sahara. From above, it resembles a colossal eye staring up from the sand, rings of stone and sediment spiraling outward, their colours fading from pale tan to deep ochre, like the iris of some sleeping giant. It looks deliberate, sculpted, almost architectural. Yet, according to official geology, it's a natural dome, the eroded core of an ancient mountain, exposed by millions of years of wind and rain. But not everyone is convinced. Long before satellites, ancient travellers spoke of a round land hidden within the Sahara. In the writings of Herodotus and Plato, there are tales of circular cities, kingdoms built in rings of water and land, ruled by kings of immense power and wisdom. One of those stories, told in hushed voices through millennia, is of Atlantis, the lost island civilization that vanished beneath the waves. When modern researchers compared Plato's description, a city of concentric rings of land and water, surrounded by mountains to the north and open plains to the south, they were startled by how closely it resembled the Eye of the Sahara. The Risha structure, like the mythical Atlantis, sits inland yet near an ancient coastline. It bears exactly the same number of circular rings. Its center is elevated, just as Plato described. Even its diameter matches almost perfectly with the measurements written over 2,000 years ago. Could it be a coincidence? Perhaps. Or could the eye be a memory of something far older than Greek myth, a place once real, whose story was passed down through ages until it became legend? Scientists argue that the structure is far too ancient to fit the timeline of human civilization. Formed, they say, long before people could have built anything there. But the Sahara has a way of bending time. Beneath its dunes, epochs blur together. What if a later civilization had discovered this strange, circular landscape and made it their home, shaping its natural rings into walls, channels, and pathways? Explorers who have visited the site describe finding traces that raise questions. Fragments of stone tools, unusual lines etched into the rock, even signs of ancient water erosion that suggest the area was once surrounded by rivers and lakes. The desert, it seems, has been here before. When the wind quiets and the sun sinks low, the Eye of the Sahara looks almost alive, as if watching, remembering, waiting. Standing at its rim, one feels both small and infinite, as though standing on the edge of memory itself. Could this place, hidden in plain sight, be the last remnant of a super-civilization erased from history? Or is it simply nature's most beautiful accident, mistaken for the ruins of a forgotten world? The truth, like the desert itself, remains silent. But one thing is certain: the Eye of the Sahara still stares back, unblinking, across time, a riddle carved in stone, daring us to remember what humanity has long forgotten. The story of Atlantis begins not in Africa, but in the mind of a philosopher, Plato. Over 2,300 years ago, he wrote of a civilization that had once ruled the world from a shining island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. It was a place of extraordinary beauty and power, filled with temples of gold, canals of silver, and kings who wielded both wisdom and arrogance. According to Plato, Atlantis fell in a single day and night of misfortune, swallowed by the sea. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as allegory, a moral tale about pride and punishment. Yet the details he gave were strangely specific. A vast circular city with alternating rings of land and water, mountains to the north, fertile plains to the south, and a wealth of natural resources beyond imagination. For most of history, no one could find such a place. But then came the satellite age, and the discovery of the Eye of the Sahara. To those who first saw it from orbit, it seemed impossible that such a perfect, concentric structure could exist naturally. When compared to Plato's description in Timaeus and Critias, the similarities were uncanny. The eye's diameter matches his measurements almost exactly. It lies near the Atlantic coast, with mountains to the north and open plains to the south. Even its central island mirrors his account of the Atlantean Acropolis, where temples and palaces once stood surrounded by moats. Some researchers began to wonder if Plato's story wasn't pure fiction after all, but a memory, distorted by time, of a civilization that once thrived in what is now the Sahara. Could it be that Atlantis wasn't a kingdom beneath the ocean, but a lost empire buried beneath the sand? When we imagine the Sahara as it is now, a desert of scorching winds and silence, it's difficult to picture it as the cradle of an advanced culture. Yet, we know from geological records that during the Green Sahara period, this region was rich with water and life. Rivers flowed from mountains to sea, forests covered the land, and great lakes shimmered beneath a gentler sun. If an ancient civilization had chosen a home, this would have been paradise. In this light, the story of Atlantis might not be about punishment or myth, but memory, a recollection of a real place destroyed not by the sea, but by the slow and merciless return of the desert. Of course, skeptics point out that the eye's origins are geological, not architectural. They argue that erosion, not engineering, carved its rings. Yet even they cannot explain why human artifacts, stone tools, pottery shards, and carved fragments have been found in the area. Nor can they deny that ancient peoples often built upon natural formations, reshaping nature's geometry into sacred design. Some theorists suggest that survivors of this vanished civilization fled eastward as their land turned to dust, carrying with them fragments of their culture, their gods, and their knowledge. Perhaps they became the seed of Egypt's rise, or of the mysterious people who once inhabited the Nile long before the first dynasties. If so, then the legend of Atlantis is not just a story of destruction, but of continuity, of knowledge preserved across ages, whispered through stone, river, and sand. And maybe, just maybe, when Plato wrote of a city swallowed by the sea, he was recording a story already 10,000 years old, one that began not in Greece, but in Africa, where the Sahara still holds its silent truth beneath the dunes. If the Sahara truly holds the memory of a lost civilization, then its proof must be buried somewhere, beneath layers of wind, time, and silence. For centuries, explorers and scientists have combed its endless horizons, searching for answers. And while no golden city has yet been unearthed, the clues are there, scattered like pieces of a dream that refuses to die. In the central Sahara, on the outskirts of the Richat structure, lie fields of strange stones, smooth, rounded, and aligned in patterns that seem too deliberate to be random. To the untrained eye, they look like the work of wind erosion, but geologists have found that many were transported from faraway regions. Someone, thousands of years ago, moved them here with purpose. When archaeologist Theodore Monod conducted expeditions across Mauritania in the mid-20th century, he documented dozens of sites where stone circles, mounds, and megalithic alignments stood half-buried in the sand. They resembled the stone monuments of Europe, dolmens, cairns, and standing stones. Yet they were older by several millennia. Who built them? And why, in a land where almost nothing could survive, would anyone go to such effort? In other parts of the Sahara, particularly in Niger and Chad, archaeologists have uncovered stone tools so finely crafted that they challenge the timeline of human progress. Some are polished to a mirror-like finish, shaped with techniques that appear far more advanced than those attributed to the hunter-gatherers who supposedly lived there. These discoveries have forced researchers to reconsider whether the people of the Green Sahara were far more sophisticated than once believed. Then there are the petroglyphs, thousands of them, carved deep into canyon walls and desert plateaus. Giraffes, elephants, and crocodiles parade across the rock faces, proof that these creatures once thrived here. But among them are other, more puzzling images. Massive structures resembling pyramids or fortresses, strange geometric designs, and beings wearing what appear to be elaborate headpieces or helmets. Some even show celestial scenes, stars, constellations, and circular objects descending from the sky. At first glance, they seem symbolic, yet, when placed on a map, many of these carvings align with ancient riverbeds and highland plateaus, locations that, in prehistoric times, would have been ideal for settlement. Were these engravings records of actual places that once existed? Or were they memories carved in stone of a civilization already fading from sight? In recent years, ground-penetrating radar and satellite imaging have revealed anomalies beneath the desert's surface, rectangular shapes, buried corridors, and clusters of stone that seem to form deliberate patterns. One such area, near the eye of the Sahara itself, displays a grid-like formation beneath several meters of sand. No expedition has yet been able to fully excavate it. The logistics are nearly impossible, but the data suggests something once stood there, something vast, now erased by time. The Sahara guards her treasures fiercely. The desert consumes and conceals in equal measure. Every discovery raises more questions than it answers, as if the land itself resists being known. Yet even in its silence, the evidence accumulates. Fragments of pottery, bones of cattle, tools shaped by unseen hands. Each piece hints at a story older than recorded history. Perhaps what we call myth is simply memory, stretched thin across the ages. Perhaps the Sahara is not empty, but filled with echoes, the remains of a people who understood the rhythm of the earth long before the first pages of our history were written. And if that's true, then somewhere beneath these endless sands, the stones themselves may still remember, waiting for the day when the wind uncovers their story once again. Beneath the Sahara's silent waves of sand lies something extraordinary, not ruins of stone or bone, but an ocean, a hidden sea that still breathes beneath the desert's skin, invisible to the eye, yet vast enough to rewrite everything we know about this land. Scientists call it the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System. It stretches beneath Egypt, Sudan, Libya, and Chad, a reservoir of ancient freshwater stored deep within the earth. It is the largest known aquifer on the planet, holding more than 150,000 cubic kilometers of water, enough to fill the Nile River for tens of thousands of years. But what's even more astonishing is how old it is. Some of this water fell as rain over 1 million years ago, when the Sahara was still green, when rivers flowed freely, and when the ancestors of humanity walked beneath its trees. If the desert hides an ocean beneath its surface, then perhaps it also hides the memory of the seas that once shaped it. For millions of years, before the desert existed, much of northern Africa was covered by shallow tropical waters, warm, life-filled seas where coral reefs flourished. The fossils that now litter the desert floor, shells, fish bones, and even the skeletons of whales, are relics of that forgotten ocean. Yes, whales. In western Egypt, there is a valley known as Wadi al-Hitan, the Valley of the Whales. There, in what is now a wasteland of burning sand, lie hundreds of perfectly preserved whale skeletons, complete with legs and tiny feet. These ancient creatures once swam in the Tethys Sea, a vast body of water that covered the Sahara region long before humans ever dreamed of civilizations. Over millions of years, the earth shifted, the sea withdrew, and the land slowly transformed into the continent's beating heart, fertile, green, and alive. But what if the memory of that ocean never truly disappeared? What if the underground sea we now call the Nubian Aquifer is the remnant of that ancient water, trapped and waiting, a silent witness to all that has come and gone above it? Some researchers believe that the aquifer's hidden currents may still influence the desert's surface. Beneath certain regions, strange oases appear without explanation, isolated pools surrounded by greenery in the middle of nothingness. They seem almost magical, but they are fed by deep springs that rise from the buried ocean below. These oases, like Siwa, Kufra, and Timimaun, have sustained life for thousands of years, islands of green in an endless gold sea. In ancient times, these oases were vital stops for travelers and traders. Yet legends say they were also sacred, places where priests and mystics could speak to the waters beneath. The Bedouins believe that under the desert lies an invisible world, not just of water, but of memory, and that the wind carries whispers from those ancient depths. If that ocean could speak, what stories would it tell? Perhaps it would remember the days when rivers still ran through the eye of the Sahara, when rain fell upon the green Sahara's grasslands, when people built their temples near lakes that shimmered like mirrors to the heavens. Now, all that remains is silence. The water still moves, but it no longer touches the sky. It flows unseen, hidden in the dark, like a ghost of the world that once was. And maybe that's the Sahara's greatest secret, that beneath its desolation lies not death, but life, sleeping, waiting, and remembering. Long before the Sahara turned to dust, its skies must have been breathtaking, vast, clear, and eternal. Without the glow of modern cities, the heavens would have revealed themselves in perfect silence. Billions of stars, shimmering across the blackness, mirrored the rivers and lakes below. Perhaps those ancient people, the ones who lived when the Sahara was still green, looked upward and found meaning there. Across the world, from Egypt to Sumer to the Americas, early civilizations built monuments aligned precisely with celestial movements. The stars guided their seasons, their crops, and their myths. But in the Sahara, something even older may have begun that story. In the southern reaches of Algeria, within the Tassili Niger Plateau, archaeologists have documented strange carvings, circles, spirals, and patterns that seem to reflect constellations. Some align perfectly with Orion, the Pleiades, and Sirius, the same stars that ancient Egyptians would later revere. It's as though the sky's map was already known here, thousands of years before the first pharaoh raised a pyramid. Coincidence, perhaps, or continuity, a thread connecting the desert's forgotten astronomers to those who came after them. Even more curious are the megalithic sites of Nabta Playa, located in what is now southern Egypt, near the Sudanese border. There, half buried in the sand, stand great stones arranged in deliberate circles. Some are small, some towering, and their alignments are astonishingly precise. When scientists studied their orientation, they discovered that the stones mark the rising of Sirius and the summer solstice, astronomical events that were crucial for predicting the Nile's floods. But Nabta Playa is not 4,000 years old like Stonehenge. It's more than 7,000 years old, built at a time when the Sahara still breathed with rain and life. That makes it one of the world's oldest known astronomical observatories. Who built it? And how did they possess such advanced knowledge of the heavens so early in human history? Some scholars suggest that the people of Nabta Playa may have been descendants of the Green Sahara's lost inhabitants, wanderers who carried with them a tradition of skywatching, using the stars not only for navigation but as sacred symbols of time and rebirth. When their homeland began to dry, they may have followed the stars north toward the Nile Valley, bringing their celestial wisdom with them. It's a haunting idea that Egypt's fascination with Orion and Sirius, the alignment of its temples and pyramids, all trace back to a forgotten age when the Sahara was green. If so, then every monument along the Nile is not just a testament to Egyptian brilliance, but to a much older legacy buried beneath the desert. Even today, the Tuareg and Bedouin people still navigate the Sahara by the stars. They speak of them not as distant suns, but as guardians, eternal companions guiding travelers through darkness. Perhaps they inherited this reverence from ancestors who once looked upon those same constellations, their reflections rippling in ancient lakes now long vanished. When the wind dies and night falls over the dunes, the stars seem impossibly close, as though you could reach out and touch them. In those moments, the desert feels alive, whispering its stories to those who listen. Maybe the stars above are not just silent witnesses to history, but messengers, carrying the memory of worlds long lost, civilizations forgotten, and people who once gazed upward, searching for their place in the infinite. The Sahara moves, not like the slow shuffle of mountains or the crawl of glaciers, but like something alive, restless and remembering. Every grain of sand is a fragment of something that once was, a riverbed, a forest floor, a mountain crushed by wind and sun. Over thousands upon thousands of years, the dunes have wandered across the continent, shifting, reshaping, and swallowing everything in their path. To walk in the desert is to walk through time itself. Beneath your feet, each layer of sand marks an age. Some particles once lay beneath prehistoric oceans. Others fell from volcanic peaks, long vanished. The wind is the sculptor here, patient, invisible, eternal. It carves mountains into waves, erases valleys overnight, and reveals fossils that haven't seen daylight in 1,000,000 years. Yet, for all its vastness, the Sahara is never still. Dunes as tall as cathedrals migrate up, few meters every year, driven by storms that rise without warning. Entire ridges collapse and rebuild elsewhere, like memories rearranging themselves in sleep. For the archaeologist, it is both a curse and a blessing. For what the sand hides, it also protects. When a storm clears, the desert sometimes exhales a secret, a stone tool, a fragment of pottery, the fossilized footprint of an animal that once walked beside man. Each discovery feels like a whisper from another world. The Tuareg, the nomadic people who have lived on the desert's edge for generations, call the Sahara Tinariwen, the lands of the infinite. They believe the sands are alive, that they move with intention, guided by the spirits of those who came before. They say the desert remembers everything, but only reveals its memories to those who listen in silence. And perhaps they are right. For as satellites watch from orbit, strange shapes emerge and vanish again within the dunes, geometric lines, circles, and depressions that appear for only a season before being erased once more. Some believe these are the ghosts of buried cities surfacing briefly, as if time itself were stirring in its sleep. Geologists speak of the Sahara's memory cycles, natural rhythms of climate that have turned it green and dry again, over and over for the past 10 million years. Every 20,000 years or so, the Earth's orbit shifts slightly, changing the monsoon patterns and awakening the desert. When that happens, grass and rain return, rivers flow, and the land breathes again. It has happened before. It will happen again. And so, the Sahara is not dead, only dreaming. Beneath the silence, beneath the endless dunes, the land waits, waiting for the tilt of the earth to turn once more, for clouds to gather again above its vastness, and for the rivers to return, tracing their ancient paths like veins of memory. When that day comes, the sand will yield its secrets. Fossils will re-emerge. Lost temples will rise again from beneath the dunes. And the desert will awaken, not as a wasteland, but as the living archive of Earth's forgotten ages. Until then, it moves, slowly, endlessly, like time itself, rewriting the past with every breath of wind. When night falls over the Sahara, silence reigns, the kind of silence that feels almost alive. The wind softens, the stars ignite, and the desert begins to whisper. To those who've crossed its endless horizons, these whispers are more than just the hum of the wind through the dunes. They are voices, echoes of something ancient, something divine. For as long as anyone can remember, travelers of the Sahara have spoken of unseen presences in the night. Strange lights gliding across the dunes, low, musical vibrations rising from the sand, sudden changes in temperature that feel like something brushing past. The Tuareg call these presences Kel Esuf, the people of solitude, spirits of the desert who dwell between worlds, guardians of forgotten memories. Some say they are the souls of those who perished when the desert claimed their lands. Others whisper that they are far older, remnants of gods once worshipped when the Sahara was still green. Every civilization leaves behind its gods. Egypt had its pantheon of kings and sun deities. Sumer had its star-born beings who brought the gift of order. But what of the people who lived before them, the ones who carved the first symbols in the Sahara's stone? What did they believe in? Whom did they serve? On the sandstone walls of Tassili Najer, deep within its labyrinthine canyons, there are images that hint at an answer. Among the thousands of figures painted there, some stand apart, colossal, radiant, surrounded by halos or rays of light. They are unlike any human form. Their heads are enormous, featureless, and glowing. Their arms stretch outward as if commanding the air. Archaeologists name them the round heads. Who were they meant to represent? Gods? Spirits? Or something else entirely? The paintings are 10,000 years old, perhaps older. They predate Egyptian hieroglyphs, Mesopotamian temples, and even written myth itself. Some scholars think they were depictions of shamans entering trances, their minds reaching into the spiritual realm. But others, quietly and controversially, wonder if they were something more literal. A record of beings who once walked among humans, teaching, guiding, and vanishing when the rains began to fade. In the mythology of the Dogon people of Mali, a culture not far from the Sahara's edge, there are tales of gods called the Nomo, who came from the sky bringing wisdom and order. They were amphibious beings, half fish and half human, descending upon a land that was once covered in water. The Dogon also possess ancient astronomical knowledge of the Sirius star system, details modern science only confirmed in the 20th century. How could such precision have survived across thousands of years, unless it had been carried from a civilization even older? Some believe the gods of the Green Sahara became the deities of Egypt, their stories reborn with new names and symbols. The sun god Ra, who sails across the sky in his celestial bark, may echo older myths of beings who once travelled the heavens when the Sahara still knew the sea. As the sands shifted and the desert swallowed their temples, the gods faded too, but not completely. They live on in whispers, in rock art, in the rituals of desert tribes who still greet the rising sun with songs older than history itself. Perhaps the Sahara was once not just a place of people, but of gods, a bridge between earth and the heavens, where mortal and divine walked side by side. And now, all that remains are echoes, faint songs carried by the wind, voices that rise from the dunes at dusk, calling out to anyone still willing to listen. The Sahara hides its treasures with a cruel kind of tenderness. What it buries, it also preserves. Beneath its oceans of sand lie relics untouched by time, remnants of lives, beliefs, and worlds that once were. To look for them is to search not just for artifacts, but for memory itself. When archaeologists sift through the dunes of Niger or Chad, they sometimes stumble upon fragments of a vanished life, a polished arrowhead glinting like a tear, the curve of a ceramic bowl still painted with ochre, the delicate bones of fish from rivers that no longer exist. Each piece is a whisper from another age, proof that the Sahara was once alive with laughter, trade, and prayer. In the central desert, near the Tassili Plateau, explorers have uncovered vast burial fields, ancient cemeteries stretching farther than the eye can see. The most famous of these lies in the Gobero site of Niger, a haunting landscape where skeletons rest in soft sand, undisturbed for thousands of years. When paleontologist Paul Sereno and his team unearthed them in the early 2000s, they found not crude burials, but signs of care and ritual. One skeleton, that of a mother and 2 children, was found embracing, their bones dusted with pollen from flowers long extinct. Another burial contained a man laid to rest with his tools and jewelry, his head turned toward the west, as if watching the setting sun. These were not nomads fleeing starvation. They were people who lived, loved, and mourned, people who believed in something beyond the horizon. But Gobero is older than most civilizations we know. Radiocarbon dating places some of its graves back 9,000 years, long before Egypt, long before Sumer. And within those same layers, researchers discovered artifacts far beyond what was expected. Beads of shell imported from distant coasts, stone tools shaped with masterful precision, and pottery etched with symbols that may represent the earliest language of the Sahara. What stands out most, however, are the patterns. Many of the burials follow the same orientation, northwest to southeast, aligning almost perfectly with the path of the stars known as Orion's belt. Coincidence, perhaps? Or could this reflect a forgotten belief, a ritual born of ancient astronomy? The same alignment later seen in Egypt's pyramids, thousands of years later? Even more mysterious are the stones that sometimes rise near these burial grounds. Large, smooth slabs set upright, forming crude circles or passages like the megaliths of Europe. Some scholars think they marked sacred sites, others that they were calendars or gateways for rituals of death and rebirth. Yet their true purpose remains unknown. To stand among them is to feel the weight of time pressing down, the wind sighing between stones, the sand shifting over unseen tombs, the faint shimmer of heat blurring the horizon. It's easy, in that stillness, to imagine the ghosts of those ancient people walking there again, their faces painted, their voices singing the same songs that once echoed through the valleys before the desert claimed them. The Sahara has devoured countless civilizations, but it has never destroyed them completely. Their bones and relics rest beneath its surface, waiting for the right storm, the right seeker, or perhaps the right age of Earth to reveal them again. For now, the desert keeps its promise, to remember in silence. The wind is the Sahara's oldest storyteller. Long before words were carved into stone or songs were written on paper, the wind was already speaking, carrying memories across dunes, shaping the landscape into instruments of sound. To walk alone through the desert is to hear those voices, soft and endless, rising and falling like waves upon an invisible shore. At night, when the air cools and the dunes release their heat, the Sahara begins to sing. The wind moves across the sand at just the right speed, vibrating grains until they hum with a deep, resonant tone, a haunting chorus that can be heard for miles. Travelers have long called it the voice of the jinn, the spirits that dwell in the emptiness between worlds. Scientists today call it singing sand, but for those who sleep beneath the desert stars, it feels like something more, a lullaby from the earth itself. In certain valleys, the sound deepens into a low vibration, like a heartbeat beneath the ground. Some explorers describe it as music, others as a warning. The Tuareg people believe that when the desert sings, it is remembering, calling out the names of those lost to its sands. They say that each dune holds a spirit, and that when the wind passes over it, that spirit speaks. Modern instruments can measure these frequencies, but they cannot capture their soul. The tones vary from place to place, sometimes a single note, sometimes a layered harmony that rises and falls with the storm. In Mauritania and Libya, researchers have recorded sounds so precise they mimic the keys of a pipe organ. Ancient travelers wrote of it too. Herodotus described the haunting voice of the desert winds, and Arab poets likened it to the cries of angels buried beneath the dunes. But there's another kind of song here, one made by memory, not sound. For as the wind moves, it uncovers fragments of the past, a shard of pottery, a polished flint, the corner of a wall, and then, in time, it buries them again. The Sahara's winds are both archaeologists and executioners, revealing the truth for only a heartbeat before hiding it once more beneath the shifting sand. Sometimes, when a sandstorm fades and silence returns, travelers claim to hear faint melodies carried on the breeze. old songs without words, echoing rhythms that seem almost human. Perhaps they are tricks of the mind, or perhaps they are something else, vibrations of time resonating through the bones of the earth itself. In many desert myths, the wind is not just an element, but a messenger. It carries prayers to the heavens, secrets to the dead, and memories to those who have forgotten. The Egyptians believed that the breath of the gods moved through the desert, shaping destinies and whispering prophecies to those who dared to listen. When you stand on a high dune at dusk, and the world turns to gold, the wind will find you too. It brushes against your skin, tugs at your clothes, and murmurs in your ear, not with words, but with feeling. It tells you that nothing is ever truly gone, that the world remembers, even when we do not. And as the stars rise one by one above the dunes, the desert begins its song again, soft, endless, eternal, carrying the stories of those who once walked where now only sand remains. The Sahara is not dead. It breathes, slowly, deeply, quietly. Beneath the endless dunes, beneath the blistering silence, the desert is alive in ways we barely understand. To most, it seems empty, an ocean of nothingness. But to those who know how to look, it is full of memory, movement, and unseen life. Even now, traces of water still flow beneath its surface, veins of moisture winding through rock and sand. Seeds lie dormant for centuries, waiting for the rare touch of rain to awaken them. And when that rain finally comes, perhaps only once in a generation, the desert blooms overnight. The dunes turn green, covered in small white and purple flowers. The air fills with the hum of insects, and frogs appear where there were none the day before, as if conjured from the earth itself. It is a vision so miraculous that travelers who witness it often weep, because for a brief moment the Sahara remembers what it once was. In that awakening, it feels as though the land itself is dreaming of its past, a past when rivers carved valleys through stone and herds grazed beneath towering acacias. Perhaps, in some quiet way, the desert still carries that memory deep within its core. Scientists studying the Sahara's soil have discovered microscopic fossils, remnants of plants and animals from tens of thousands of years ago. They lie preserved in layers like pages of an ancient book, each grain of sand a word in a story that never truly ended. Beneath those layers are pockets of trapped air, tiny bubbles of atmosphere from the time when the Sahara was green. To open them is to breathe the same air that once nourished forests and lakes. But memory here is not just physical, it's spiritual. The people who live along the Sahara's edges, the Tuareg, the Berbers, the Tubu, speak of the desert as if it were alive. They give the dunes names, like old friends. They talk to them before setting out on a journey, and thank them upon returning safely. To them, the Sahara is both mother and judge, capable of giving life or taking it away without warning. They believe that the souls of their ancestors travel within the wind, guiding caravans, whispering warnings, and carrying the wisdom of generations. And when they rest at night beside their camels, beneath the glittering sky, they tell stories of how the desert once spoke through visions, showing their forefathers where to dig for water or when to move before a storm. Maybe these are not just legends. Maybe they are echoes of an older truth. that the earth itself holds memory, and that certain places, like the Sahara, can still speak it aloud. For even in modern times, the desert reveals strange wonders. Satellite images show patterns beneath the dunes that resemble ancient roads or walls. Magnetometers detect shifts in the soil that could only have been caused by buried structures. And in some regions, explorers have found magnetic anomalies, invisible fingerprints that suggest the presence of metal deep underground, long before human history records its use. Each new discovery feels less like something new and more like something remembered. The Sahara may appear to be a wasteland, but in truth, it is the Earth's greatest archive, a living memory of all the worlds that came before ours. Every grain of sand has witnessed empires rise and fall. Every gust of wind carries whispers of those who once called this place home. And though the desert may never tell us everything it knows, it keeps its promise to hold the past safe until humanity is ready to listen once more. When the last rains faded and the green Sahara began its long death, its people faced an impossible choice: vanish with the rivers or follow them. And so they moved, slowly, generation by generation, chasing the shrinking waters north and east, until they found refuge beside a new and mightier river. A river that would one day be called the Nile. This was not migration in the way we imagine it. It was exile from paradise. Families left behind the graves of their ancestors, the stone circles of their rituals, and the gods who had once walked among them. They carried with them what they could: their tools, their stories, their knowledge of stars and seasons, and set out toward the promise of life. Archaeologists now believe that the people who settled along the early Nile were not strangers to civilization, but inheritors of it. In the oases and valleys between Libya, Chad, and Egypt, evidence shows a slow blending of cultures. Pottery identical to those found in the central Sahara, tools of the same stone, and burial practices that mirror the desert's oldest graves. These were the children of the green Sahara, survivors of a forgotten world, shaping a new one from the ashes of their lost homeland. Along the edges of the Nile, they found abundance once more. The river flooded each year, leaving behind rich, dark soil. The people built their homes near its banks, planted barley and flax, and watched the cycles of the sun and moon to predict its rhythm. Their ancient habit of studying the stars, once used to mark the rains of the Sahara, now became the foundation of calendars, rituals, and sacred architecture. And as they settled, memory transformed into myth. The gods they had once known, those luminous beings of the desert rock art, reappeared under new names. The Roundheads became the faces of divine kings. The sun deity who once rose over the green Sahara became Ra, the Egyptian sun god. The great river, which gave and took life, became sacred itself, a reflection of the heavens, where souls journeyed after death. Somewhere in this merging of desert and river, the first spark of what we now call Egyptian civilization was lit. The earliest Egyptian settlements, dating to around 5,000 years before our time, already show signs of remarkable sophistication. Agriculture, stonework, astronomy, and complex spiritual beliefs. These were not inventions from nothing. They were continuations, evolutions of ideas born long before, in a place that no longer existed. The ancient Egyptians themselves seemed to remember. They called their homeland Ta Seti, the land of the bow, a name also used for regions far to the south and west, deep in what was once the fertile Sahara. Their oldest myths speak of ancestors who came from the west, when the sun still rose over green lands. Some scholars dismiss this as poetic allegory, but for those who know the Sahara's hidden history, it feels like an echo, a faint but undeniable remembrance of where it all began. Even the architecture of Egypt bears traces of its desert past. The alignment of pyramids with Orion's belt, the reverence for Sirius, the use of solar and stellar cycles, all of it hints at a legacy older than Egypt itself. Perhaps the builders of the pyramids were not inventing these traditions, but reviving them, guided by memories carried from the Green Sahara. And so, the lost civilization may not have vanished after all. It may have lived on, not in the sands, but in the blood, language, and imagination of those who followed. The Nile became its second life, and Egypt its rebirth. The Sahara may have forgotten their cities, but humanity never truly forgot their story. It simply changed its name. The story of Egypt is a story of rebirth, the awakening of memory beneath a new sun. And deep within that story, like a heartbeat beneath stone, the desert still speaks. Though the Sahara turned to dust long before the first pyramid rose, its spirit lives on in every temple, every symbol, every line of hieroglyph carved into the banks of the Nile. When the Green Sahara died, its people carried with them more than tools and stories. They carried ideas, ideas that would shape the world's first great civilization. Their knowledge of the stars became the backbone of Egyptian astronomy. Their understanding of rivers and floods became the science of irrigation. Their reverence for the life-giving sun became the foundation of a religion that would endure for thousands of years. Even the design of Egypt's sacred monuments seems to echo the lost geometry of the Sahara. The great pyramids of Giza are not random. Their alignment mirrors the belt of Orion, the same constellation that guided the desert's people through the ages. The temple complexes of Karnak and Luxor are built along celestial lines, their entrances facing the rising of specific stars. It is as if the builders were trying to preserve a connection between heaven and earth, one learned long ago, beneath the night skies of the Green Sahara. Some researchers have noted curious similarities between the architecture of early Egypt and the ruins scattered across the western deserts. Low stone circles, subterranean chambers, and long corridors carved into rock. In the Fezzan region of Libya, thousands of kilometers from the Nile, explorers have found labyrinthine tombs and underground aqueducts known as fogaras, a technology for channeling water through the desert that may predate the Egyptian irrigation systems themselves. Could this be a surviving trace of that older knowledge, a gift from the ancestors of the desert? Even Egypt's gods seem to remember where they came from. The earliest depictions of Ra, Horus, and Osiris show them surrounded by symbols of the desert: the falcon, the jackal, the serpent, all creatures that ruled the dunes long before the Nile Valley bloomed. The goddess Hathor, patron of fertility and motherhood, was called Lady of the Western Desert. Her shrines stood at the edge of the sands, facing westward, toward the lands her people once called home. In the sacred texts of the Book of the Dead, there are constant references to the hidden lands, the fields of reeds, and the sea of stars, realms of eternal life said to lie beyond the setting sun in the far west. To the Egyptians, that direction was sacred, not because it led to the sea, but because it led to memory, to the place where life began before time began. Perhaps that hidden land was no celestial paradise at all, but the Sahara as it once was, lush, green and alive. Every Egyptian ritual, every alignment of temple and tomb, every hymn to the rising and setting sun seems to echo that earlier time when people watched the sky not for gods, but for rain. The desert had taught them that life and death were parts of the same cycle, that the land could die only to bloom again. The Nile's annual flood became a mirror of that eternal lesson: death and renewal, drought and abundance, forgetting and remembrance. So, in a way, Egypt was not a new beginning, but a continuation, the green Sahara reborn in stone. Its people remembered the lost paradise, not through words, but through architecture, art, and ritual. Each monument was a prayer to their forgotten homeland. Each temple a reflection of the stars that once guided them through greener lands. And though the sands have long since reclaimed their origins, the memory remains. To look upon the pyramids today is to glimpse not just Egypt, but the Sahara's ghost, the echo of a civilization that refused to be erased, whispering still through the voice of the Nile. Beneath the Sahara's boundless silence lies a network that once pulsed with life, a web of forgotten roads, caravan trails, and trade routes carved into the earth by the feet of those who refused to surrender to the desert. Today, the dunes seem endless, empty, and eternal, but the truth is far more intricate. The Sahara was once crossed by arteries of stone and sand that connected empires, cultures, and dreams. From the air, satellite images reveal faint lines etched into the desert's surface, ghostly pathways stretching for hundreds of kilometers, often in perfectly straight courses. These are not the scars of wind or water, they are roads. Some lead toward ancient oases, others vanish beneath the dunes as if swallowed whole. Yet their direction and precision suggest design, purpose, and endurance. Long before Rome or Greece, long before the pharaohs raised their pyramids, people traveled these routes, shepherds, traders, and seekers carrying salt, gold, obsidian, and stories. They moved between the ancient lake basins of the Sahara, through valleys where rivers once flowed, and across high plateaus that overlooked endless seas of grass. These were the roads of memory, paths that tied the fragments of the green Sahara together like the threads of a tapestry now buried beneath time. Even after the desert dried, those routes did not vanish entirely. The people adapted. Caravans replaced boats, camels replaced cattle. The Sahara became a bridge, not a barrier, a passage through which ideas, languages, and faiths traveled. From Timbuktu to Thebes, from Carthage to Chad, the desert carried human stories across continents. The Tuareg and Berber peoples still follow traces of these ancient trails. To them, each route has a name, a lineage, and a spirit. They speak of the old roads, Taglamt Nimaulan, the paths of the ancestors. They believe these routes are not merely physical, but sacred, guiding travelers not only across land, but through time itself. To walk them is to retrace the steps of the first civilizations, to listen to the echo of sandals against stone that no longer exists. In the western Sahara, near the Adrar Plateau of Mauritania, explorers have found long chains of stone markers leading toward the eye of the Sahara. Some believe these may have been ancient navigation guides, a system older than history, built to help travelers find their way across the shifting sands. Others think they mark the borders of kingdoms that once ruled the desert before it turned to dust. In certain regions, traces of wheel ruts have been found fossilized in rock, not modern, not Roman, but far older. How could there have been wheel transport in a region thought to be inhabited only by nomads? It raises unsettling questions. Who built these roads? What vehicles or technologies did they use? And where were they going? Even the desert's ancient caravanserais, the resting stations for travelers, tell stories of continuity. Many are built atop ruins far older than themselves, as if each generation rediscovered the same sacred resting places again and again. The oldest of these sites, some say, lie directly along the invisible lines that connect the Sahara's ancient rivers and vanished cities, a geography remembered by instinct rather than map. To the unknowing eye, the desert appears to erase all traces of the past, but in truth, it preserves them, thin lines beneath the sand, whispering of motion, trade, and life. Each road tells of a time when the Sahara was not an obstacle, but a crossroads, a place where civilizations met, exchanged, and merged. And though the wind has hidden their paths, they still exist, deep beneath the dunes, waiting for another dawn. For the desert remembers not only what it has lost, but where it has been. Its hidden roads are the veins of history itself, carrying the pulse of humanity across the sands of eternity. Long after the green Sahara withered into silence, new rulers rose upon its bones. In the places where rivers once ran, kingdoms emerged, ephemeral, radiant, and often erased as swiftly as they appeared. Their names are whispered now only by historians and by the wind, but once they ruled the world's largest desert. To the north, along the Libyan plains and the deep valleys of Fezzan, lay the Garamantes. They were a people of ingenuity and defiance, dwelling in a land so harsh that outsiders believed it uninhabitable. Yet the Garamantes thrived. They built stone fortresses, cultivated crops in the desert, and dug elaborate underground tunnels, fogaras, that carried cool groundwater across vast distances. Some of these channels stretched for tens of kilometers, a marvel of engineering in a place where rain falls once in a generation. For centuries, the Garamantes traded with Carthage, Rome, and Egypt. Gold, ivory, salt, and slaves passed through their cities, caravans gliding across the dunes like ships upon a golden sea. The Romans called them Lords of the Sands, but to themselves they were something more. Their art and symbols suggest an ancestry they claimed from deep antiquity, perhaps even from the lost people of the Green Sahara. Some of their settlements stand atop older ruins, their foundations resting on stones worn smooth by forgotten hands. To the west, near the Atlantic edge of the desert, other kingdoms flourished. The ancient empires of Ghana and Mali, names that would echo through history, drew their strength from trade flowing across the Sahara. Gold from the south met salt from the north, carried by endless caravans under skies filled with stars. These routes, though established in the later millennia, may have followed paths that had existed since prehistoric times, the invisible arteries of a civilization that refused to die. In the central Sahara, the Tassili kingdoms emerged, smaller, mysterious cultures whose remnants survive only in art and ruins. Their rock engravings depict crowned figures, processions, and what appear to be ceremonial masks. Some scholars believe these were the earliest monarchies on Earth, not empires built with conquest, but with memory. Each ruler seen as a descendant of the ancestors who once ruled the Green Sahara when it was alive with rivers and rain. The desert kings did not build monuments to last. They ruled a shifting world, their cities vulnerable to sand, their power dependent on water that could vanish overnight. But their legacy endured through movement, not stone. The Berbers of North Africa, the Tuareg who traverse the dunes today, and even tribes along the Nile still trace their lineage back to these forgotten monarchs. In their oral histories, one hears echoes of ancient grandeur, of palaces buried in sand, of thrones carved from salt, of temples lost to the storms. One legend, still told in Mauritania, speaks of a king named Amar Teguelmint, whose city was so vast its outer walls touched the horizon. He ruled when the Sahara still bore rivers and fields, and when the drought came, he refused to flee. Instead, he commanded his people to build a city beneath the dunes, hidden from the sun. When his kingdom finally fell silent, the desert rose over it like a tide. Locals claim that on certain nights, when the moon is full, a faint light glimmers beneath the sand where his palace once stood, as though the king's city still burns beneath the earth. History, of course, has forgotten him, but the desert has not. The Garamantes, the Mali Empire, the phantom kingdoms between, all of them carry fragments of something older, each built upon the memory of the Sahara's lost paradise, drawing strength from the bones of the land that birthed them. And when their time came to fade, the sands took them back, folding their cities and their names into the desert's living memory. The kings of the Sahara may be gone, but their crowns remain, not of gold, but of sand and wind, eternal as the sun that still burns above their silent realm. Empires rise like mirages in the desert, bright, impossible, and fleeting. They shimmer for a moment in history, then fade into the golden silence. Yet their echoes never truly disappear. The Sahara, more than any other place on Earth, is haunted by the ghosts of empires that refused to die. Long after the Garamantes carved their tunnels beneath the sand, and centuries after the first pharaohs built their kingdoms along the Nile, the desert continued to hum with life. Trade and memory bound its scattered peoples together, invisible threads linking oasis to oasis, tribe to tribe, generation to generation. The Sahara was no longer the home of a single empire, but a living network, a heart whose pulse reached across continents. The Romans called it Deserta Libica, the empty land. Yet even they could not resist its pull. Roman coins have been found deep within the dunes, in places where no Roman soldier is known to have set foot. These coins lie beside artifacts from Egypt, from Nubia, and from lands as distant as Persia, proof that the Sahara was never isolation, but connection. It was a highway of silence, a realm of exchange, where cultures met beneath the eternal stars. When the tides of history shifted once more, and the great empires of North Africa rose and fell, Carthage, Numidia, and later the caliphates of Islam, the desert remained the constant. Caravans carried salt, gold, and knowledge across its breadth. Through the Sahara passed not only goods, but wisdom, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, ideas that would one day help ignite the Renaissance. Even as the sands crept further each year, human voices continued to cross them. In the Middle Ages, travelers from the Mediterranean wrote of cities shimmering at the desert's edge. Places like Walata, Oudagost, and Timbuktu, where scholars gathered beneath carved wooden ceilings to discuss the nature of stars, gods, and time itself. The manuscripts of Timbuktu, still preserved today, hold secrets written in delicate Arabic script, texts that speak of geometry, astrology, and histories of kings long forgotten. Some of these writings hint at even older sources, books from before the desert, as one translation calls them. Could those texts be the final whispers of the Sahara's first civilization, their memory kept alive in the hands of scribes who never knew their true origin? Every empire that touched the Sahara left behind an echo. The Garamantes and their underground cities, the pharaohs and their celestial monuments, the traders of Mali and their golden caravans, each built upon the bones of the last, layer upon layer, until history became less a line than a circle, a spiral turning slowly beneath the sun. And that spiral still turns. The desert, though silent, continues to shape the people who live near it. The Berbers and Tuareg, who trace invisible roads across the dunes, are heirs to an inheritance older than any written word. In their songs, in their poetry, in the rhythm of their footsteps, one can still feel the pulse of empires gone by. Even now, explorers and scientists wander the Sahara's vastness, scanning the ground with radar, listening to the whispers of buried stone. They search for lost cities, for traces of the impossible. But perhaps they are looking in the wrong place. The empire they seek may not lie beneath the sand, but within it, woven into the desert's very breath, its moving dunes, its timeless silence. For in the Sahara, nothing truly ends. The wind erases and restores. The sand buries and reveals. The past becomes the present, and the present becomes memory. Every storm rewrites history. Every sunrise paints over what came before. And so, the empires of the desert live on, not in ruins or relics, but in echo, a soft vibration carried by the wind, traveling endlessly across the dunes, repeating the same story the earth has told since time began. Nothing is lost. Everything returns. Far out in the western heart of Mauritania, the desert seems to breathe differently. The dunes rise higher, the air feels heavier, and then, as if the earth itself opens its gaze, the eye of the Sahara appears once more. From the ground, it is almost invisible, an endless horizon of rock and silence. But from the sky, it is unmistakable, a perfect spiral, a colossal eye staring up at the heavens, unchanged through millennia. The locals have always known this place. To them, it is not a mystery, but a living being. Sahara's heart, they call it. They say that when the world forgets, the eye remembers. When men lie, the eye still sees. It is a symbol of endurance, of cycles repeating, of the endless dialogue between earth and sky. When astronauts first photographed it in the 1960s, the world was stunned. Here, in one of the most desolate places on the planet, was a structure so vast that it could only be seen in its entirety from space. The spiral seemed too deliberate to be natural, too symmetrical to be random. Geologists called it the Rishat structure, explaining it as an eroded dome of rock, sculpted by wind and time. Yet even now, standing within its circular ridges, one cannot help but feel something else, an awareness, a strange hum beneath the silence, as though the land itself remembers its purpose. Legends older than history speak of a place called Rashidat, a city of rings where kings and gods once walked among mortals. Some say the eye is all that remains of it, its foundations turned to stone, its people erased by the desert's wrath. Others whisper that the eye was never built by human hands, but left behind by the earth's own will, a natural monument marking the center of the world. Still, the coincidences persist. The eye's three main rings mirror the measurements given by Plato in his writings about Atlantis, rings of land and water, surrounded by mountains to the north and open plains to the south. Its size matches. Its location, just beyond the Pillars of Hercules, fits the myth's geography, and traces of ancient shorelines nearby suggest that this region once sat beside a vast inland sea. When explorers walk through the eye's innermost ring, they find the ground scattered with ancient artifacts, stone tools, shards of pottery, and fossilized shells. Here, once, water flowed. Here, perhaps, a people lived who understood the secrets of both earth and sky. Some researchers believe that the eye's concentric design, though natural, may have inspired settlement, that humans were drawn to it not just for its beauty, but because it mirrored the cosmos. Many ancient cultures believed that heaven and earth were reflections of one another, that geometry was divine. Perhaps the eye served as a temple to that idea, place where the people of the Green Sahara could align themselves with the rhythm of creation. As the centuries passed and the climate shifted, the rivers that fed this region vanished. The inhabitants, whoever they were, faded into myth. The desert swept in like a tide, sealing away the eye beneath silence. But the circle remained, patient and perfect, the earth's memory etched in stone. Even now, modern explorers and satellite missions return again and again, drawn by a force they can't quite explain. Each new scan reveals more. Traces of water channels, patterns beneath the surface, faint anomalies suggesting the presence of man-made structures hidden deep below. But the desert guards its secrets carefully. At dusk, when the sun lowers and the eye's ridges cast long shadows, it looks less like a ruin and more like a mirror, reflecting the golden sky, glowing softly as if alive. In that light, it's easy to believe that the eye is watching, waiting, remembering a time when the Sahara was green, when gods and kings walked its sands, and when civilization itself may have begun right here, in the heart of the world. The desert is a patient thief. It steals slowly, silently, one grain at a time, until entire worlds vanish beneath its golden tide. What once were cities, gardens, and rivers have become whispers, buried under thousands of years of wind. To stand in the Sahara today is to walk upon the bones of forgotten ages, hidden so deeply that even time itself has lost count. When the first explorers crossed these sands, they described it as an ocean turned to stone, but they did not yet know how accurate that image was. For like an ocean, the desert moves, waves of dust rising and falling, swallowing mountains, burying valleys, concealing everything it touches. And beneath those dunes, scientists now know, lies a world sealed in silence, layers of history untouched since the last age of rain. Every storm is both an ending and a beginning. The wind howls across the land, lifting the smallest grains and carrying them for hundreds of miles. It smooths away every edge, every trace of human hands, leaving behind a surface so pure it feels almost deliberate, as if the desert itself were trying to erase its own past. Yet underneath that smoothness lies preservation beyond imagining. Without air or moisture, time stands still beneath the sand. Pottery shards remain sharp, bones remain white, footprints endure for millennia. Archaeologists who dig in these forgotten places often speak of a strange feeling, a sense that they are trespassing upon the dreams of the earth. In Niger, one team unearthed a cluster of tools made of obsidian, each blade still shining as if newly crafted. In Libya's Fezzan region, another team uncovered entire walls of sandstone, buried more than 5 meters deep. Walls that formed perfect right angles, like the corners of houses or temples. They had been sealed there for over 7,000 years. But most of what the desert hides has yet to be found. Beneath certain regions, radar scans have revealed vast anomalies, straight lines, circular depressions, and dense clusters of stone beneath the dunes. Some researchers suggest these could be geological, but others suspect something more: the foundations of lost cities, buried by centuries of shifting sand. One such region lies not far from the eye of the Sahara. Here, the sand forms a shallow basin surrounded by ridges that look almost carved. When the wind blows in just the right direction, fragments of ancient stone structures emerge, only to disappear again a day later. Locals call the place Turkit, the ground that forgets. They say that sometimes, at sunset, you can hear the sound of bells beneath the sand, as if an ancient city is still alive below, its echoes trapped in time. Even the fossils tell the same story. Skeletons of fish, crocodiles, and hippos lie entombed beneath the dunes, perfectly preserved, proof that this desert was once a place of rivers and life. Among them, occasionally, are tools and ornaments left by human hands. It is as though nature and civilization died together, buried side by side. Some scientists now believe that entire settlements from the Green Sahara may be buried under hundreds of meters of sand, unreachable by traditional excavation. They imagine vast underground chambers, sealed tombs, and temples waiting in the dark, their stories written in silence. If we could strip away the dunes, we might find not emptiness, but continuity, a bridge between the world that was and the one we know. But perhaps the desert keeps its secrets for a reason. For every storm that buries history, another will one day reveal it. The sands that swallowed the past are also the hands that preserve it. When the rains return, as they have before, the dunes will retreat, and the Sahara will awaken again. Rivers will carve through the forgotten cities, and what was hidden will rise into the light. Until that time, the desert waits, vast, golden, and eternal, holding in its quiet heart the remains of all that came before. Long before satellites and compasses, before ships crossed the Atlantic or telescopes traced the stars, there were maps of the impossible. Drawn on parchment and carved into stone, they showed rivers flowing through what is now the Sahara, coastlines that no longer exist, and cities marked deep within regions we call lifeless. For centuries, historians dismissed them as errors, inventions of imagination. But as the desert began to reveal its secrets through modern science, those old maps started to look less like fantasy and more like memory. One of the most mysterious among them is the Piri Reis map, created in the early 16th century by an Ottoman admiral who claimed to have compiled his chart from sources 1,000 years old. On that map, the northern edge of Africa is drawn with eerie accuracy. Rivers, deltas, and inland waterways winding through what we know today as endless dunes. Even more astonishing, it depicts the Sahara as a land divided by vast lakes, nearly identical to the prehistoric ones scientists have confirmed through satellite imaging. How could cartographers of the Renaissance have known what lay buried beneath the sand thousands of years before? There are others too. The Al-Idrisi map of the 12th century shows a green and fertile Sahara, dotted with cities and waterways. The Herodotus accounts from ancient Greece describe entire fleets crossing what he called the sea without water, a desert navigated by guides who followed landmarks and stars, not waves. And still older legends, passed through Arabic and Berber oral traditions, speak of the inland sea, a body of water said to lie hidden in the desert's heart, large enough to swallow caravans whole. Modern researchers have long wondered whether these stories might hold fragments of truth. Subsurface radar and geological scans have confirmed that beneath the Sahara stretch enormous dry basins, fossil lakes that once glimmered beneath the ancient sun. The largest, Lake Megachad, once covered more than 300,000 square kilometers, larger than the Caspian Sea. Even today, traces of its shorelines can be seen from space. It seems the mapmakers were not drawing dreams, but memories, inherited from a time when the Sahara was alive. Their charts may have been the last echoes of knowledge passed down from those who once lived there, preserved in scrolls and stories, until the meaning was lost, but the shape remained. What if the earliest mapmakers were not explorers at all, but descendants of survivors, wanderers from a civilization buried beneath the sands? Perhaps they remembered the rivers that once flowed through this desert, the mountains that bordered their cities, and the seas that mirrored their skies. Perhaps those memories became legend, and legend became ink. Even in the modern age, strange consistencies persist. When European cartographers of the 17th century mapped the interior of Africa, many placed a kingdom of the dead, or a white city, near the same coordinates where the Eye of the Sahara lies today. Some claimed to have heard of ancient ruins visible only during certain seasons, when winds revealed the tips of towers before covering them again. To most historians, these are coincidences, the product of imagination filling blank spaces. But to others, they are proof of continuity, the remnants of a world humanity once knew intimately, now half remembered, half forgotten. The desert, after all, does not destroy knowledge. It buries it. And sometimes, when the light is right, it lets us see, just for a moment, the faint lines of those impossible maps hovering above the dunes like ghosts. If those ancient cartographers could have seen what we see today, the satellite images showing the veins of ancient rivers, the outlines of vanished lakes, the hidden geometry beneath the sands, perhaps they would not have been surprised. Perhaps they already knew. For the Sahara is not a blank space on the map of the world. It is the map itself, drawn by time, erased by wind, and waiting, patiently, for us to learn how to read it again. What we see of the Sahara, the golden dunes, the blinding horizons, the endless sky, is only its surface. Beneath it lies another world, one hidden from sunlight for thousands upon thousands of years. A world of tunnels, chambers, and caverns that may hold the final memories of the civilizations that vanished when the desert awoke. Long before satellites or scanners, stories of a hidden world beneath the Sahara were whispered among the nomads. The Tuareg spoke of the hollow earth beneath the dunes, a labyrinth of stone halls and rivers of black water guarded by spirits who never sleep. To enter them, they said, was to walk into the afterlife while still alive. Few returned, and those who did were forever changed, their eyes distant, their voices trembling when they spoke of the echoes below. For centuries, explorers dismissed these tales as superstition, until the desert began to confirm them. Beneath Libya, Egypt, and Sudan, archaeologists have found ancient tunnels carved into sandstone, some stretching for kilometers, others connecting to deep wells and underground chambers. In the region once ruled by the Garamantes, entire cities have been discovered beneath the surface, their streets narrow, their roofs supported by stone arches, their air still cool after 2,000 years. These were not simple shelters. They were feats of engineering far ahead of their time. Aqueducts and passageways built to channel water from the hidden aquifers below. Even today, some of these Fagara tunnels still flow with life, carrying the desert's buried ocean to the surface drop by drop. But there are deeper mysteries still. In certain regions, especially near the Ahaga Mountains and the Gilfkebir Plateau, ground-penetrating radar has detected vast cavities beneath the rock, too symmetrical, too regular to be natural. These anomalies stretch for miles, forming grids and chambers at depths of 50 to 100 meters. No one knows who carved them or when. Some scientists suggest they are ancient lava tubes, remnants of long-dead volcanoes. Others, quietly, wonder if they might be the ruins of something older, perhaps a civilization forced underground when the Sahara began to die. There are legends that speak of the people who fled the sun, a race who built their cities beneath the earth to escape the endless drought. They lived by torchlight, it is said, their temples carved from red stone, their knowledge preserved in tablets of crystal that shone with their own light. When desert storms sweep across Mauritania, locals sometimes hear low rumbles coming from deep, beneath the ground. Geologists call it seismic movement, but to those who live there, it is something else, the breathing of the underground world, a reminder that what sleeps below has not been forgotten. Even modern expeditions have recorded strange phenomena, magnetic fluctuations, heat anomalies, and sudden drops in radio signals near certain regions of the desert. It is as if the land itself shields something, a hidden infrastructure, an ancient memory not yet ready to be seen. Some researchers believe that beneath the Sahara lies one of the world's oldest subterranean networks, older than the catacombs of Rome, older than the stepwells of India, older even than recorded history. They imagine vast tunnels connecting oases and forgotten cities, carved by human hands during the last green Sahara, when the land began to dry. Perhaps this underground world was their final refuge, a place where knowledge could be preserved as the surface turned to sand. If this is true, then beneath our feet lies an archive of humanity's first age, untouched, unseen, and waiting. At night, when the desert cools and the stars appear, Some say you can feel it, a faint vibration through the ground, like the heartbeat of something immense. The wind hums above, but below, the earth seems to listen. And maybe, somewhere deep beneath the dunes, in the dark halls, where no light has touched for thousands of years, the last voices of the lost Sahara still echo, waiting for someone, someday, to hear them again. There are places in the Sahara where the ground feels alive, where the sand trembles faintly, as if stirred by something deep below. The desert appears eternal on the surface, but under its skin, forces of unimaginable power are always moving. Heat, water, memory, and perhaps something else, something older than humanity itself. In the silence between dunes, strange events have long been reported. Travelers speak of soft, rhythmic vibrations underfoot that come and go without cause. Others describe seeing the sand pulse in the moonlight, as if breathing. Some scientists attribute it to shifting air pockets or temperature differences beneath the surface. But those who live here, the Tuareg and Bedouin, tell a different story. They say the desert is waking. According to their legends, the Sahara was once the heart of the world, a place where the earth itself spoke through rivers, storms, and fire. When mankind forgot how to listen, the land fell silent, its voice buried under endless sand. But silence, they say, is not death. It is sleep. The desert only rests between ages, waiting for the time when it will speak again. And perhaps, in its own way, it already has. Over the last few decades, satellites orbiting Earth have detected strange anomalies beneath the Sahara. Vast magnetic fields shift unpredictably in certain regions. Pockets of heat rise from deep underground, where no volcano should exist. Entire layers of the desert floor appear to be subtly moving, not from erosion, but from pressure building beneath the crust. Some geologists believe this could be the slow resurgence of ancient aquifers, or the reawakening of fault lines long thought extinct. Others whisper of something less tangible, the stirring of the planet's own memory. One particularly haunting discovery came in 2015, when researchers using radar imaging near the Gilf Kabir Plateau found what appeared to be a massive circular cavity buried a kilometre beneath the sand. Its diameter was nearly identical to the eye of the Sahara, as if the Earth itself mirrored the same pattern deep below. Coincidence, perhaps, but some saw it as a symbol, the desert remembering its shape, preparing to rise again. As climate patterns shift once more, scientists predict that the Sahara may one day return to life. The Earth's slow wobble, which controls the rhythm of the monsoons, is changing again, just as it did 10,000 years ago when the green Sahara bloomed. Already, certain regions are seeing unexpected rainfall, new vegetation, and the return of migratory birds not seen there in centuries. Nature, it seems, is tracing the same path back toward renewal, and with it, perhaps, the memories buried beneath will awaken too. When the rains return, the dunes will retreat, revealing the bones of lakes, the ruins of cities, the tools of forgotten hands. The eye of the Sahara will glimmer once more under clouds, its spiral glowing with reflected water. The underground rivers will rise, filling their channels again, and life will flow through the desert, like blood returning to a sleeping heart. To imagine such a moment is to feel the breath of time itself. The Sahara, which we see as lifeless and empty, may only be pausing between heartbeats, waiting for the next age of rain, when the earth remembers its past and dreams it anew. Perhaps that is the true secret of the desert. Not loss, but return. It teaches that everything that fades will one day rise again, that civilizations, like seasons, are never truly gone. And maybe, when the Sahara blooms again, the wind will carry the voices of its ancestors once more. Voices that have waited patiently beneath the sand, whispering across the ages. We were here. We will be here again. Every great civilization leaves behind a shadow in the form of myth, a story that endures long after stone has turned to dust. And sometimes, those stories are not merely fantasies, but memories wearing the mask of legend. Among all the world's myths, none resonates more with the silence of the Sahara than the tale of Atlantis, a story of paradise, of knowledge, and of loss. Plato wrote his dialogues Timaeus and Critias over 2,300 years ago, claiming that the story of Atlantis was passed to him from the priests of ancient Egypt. They told of an empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the modern Strait of Gibraltar, that had fallen in a single night of earthquakes and floods. Its people, they said, were once wise and divine, but grew proud and greedy, and so the gods sent the sea to reclaim them. But what if the story's setting had been misunderstood? What if Atlantis was never beneath the ocean at all, but beneath the sand? The parallels are uncanny. A land of rings, surrounded by mountains to the north and open plains to the south. A civilization of great builders and astronomers, whose knowledge vanished when their world was swallowed. The Sahara, with its eye-shaped scar in Mauritania, its buried rivers, and its fossil seas, fits the story not as coincidence, but as echo. If the Egyptians were the inheritors of the Green Sahara's wisdom, as their myths and symbols suggest, then perhaps the story of Atlantis was their distant memory of that lost homeland, preserved and retold to the Greeks millennia later. The flood that destroyed Atlantis may have been no oceanic cataclysm, but the slow, merciless drowning of paradise in sand. Across the desert's rim, cultures separated by time and distance share hauntingly similar tales. The Berbers of North Africa speak of a vanished city buried under the dunes, where lamps still burn in underground halls. In Mali, legends tell of a shining land called Tamaina, where gods walked among men before it was turned upside down by the wrath of the sun. In Egypt, ancient hymns to the god Atum describe a primeval hill rising from the flood, echoing the rebirth of the world after destruction. Perhaps a poetic retelling of the Sahara's cycles of life and death. Even the Dogon people, whose knowledge of the Sirius star system continues to mystify astronomers, claim descent from beings who came from the west, from the land of great waters. To them, the world began not with creation, but with remembrance, the return of knowledge that had once been lost. It is as though every culture bordering the Sahara remembers the same event, a paradise that fell, a wisdom that vanished, and a promise that one day the land would live again. When viewed this way, myth becomes more than superstition. It becomes archaeology of the soul, the fragments of truth preserved in song, story, and symbol. The story of Atlantis may not be the history of a single city, but the collective memory of humanity's first great loss, the death of the Green Sahara, and with it, the first age of civilization. And perhaps this is why the legend endures. because deep down we recognize it, we feel it. Humanity has always known the fear of forgetting, the ache of losing what once was. The story of Atlantis, the myths of the Sahara, the songs of Egypt, they are all the same plea spoken through time. Do not forget us. The desert has not forgotten. It hums with memory, like a song beneath the surface, low, patient, eternal. And if you stand in the eye of the Sahara at night, when the stars align just so you might almost hear it, a faint chorus carried by the wind, echoing across millennia. It is the song of Atlantis, the song of the Sahara, the song of the world that was. There are few places on earth where silence feels heavier than in the Sahara at night. Beneath that endless sky, where the stars seem close enough to touch, the world feels ancient, as if it remembers everything that has ever been. The desert may no longer have a written language, but it still speaks through stories, carried across generations, like embers kept alive through darkness. Among the nomads who call this place home, there are prophecies, not written in books, but sung in whispers. Tales passed from elders to children beside flickering fires, warnings and promises woven into verse. They speak of an age when the desert will wake again, when its sands will open, and the world will remember what it has lost. One such legend, told by the Tuareg, speaks of Tin Hinan, the mother of the tribes. They say she came from the north with her followers long ago, carrying the wisdom of a fallen world. When she died, she was buried beneath a great mound of stone in the Hoggar Mountains. Her tomb still stands there today, watched over by silence. The prophecy says that when the desert blooms again, Tin Hinan will rise, leading her people to rebuild the land as it once was. To the west, in Mauritania, an older prophecy is told in fragments, that the heart of the desert will one day open its eye, and that those who hear its call will rediscover the knowledge of the first people, the builders, the astronomers, the keepers of light. No one knows when or how this will happen, only that it is inevitable, as certain as the return of the rains. Even in Egypt, echoes of these ideas persist. The Book of the Dead and the pyramid texts often refer to cycles of destruction and renewal, to lands drowned, then reborn, and to gods who sleep beneath the dust until the world remembers their names. In one inscription from Abydos, a priest describes a place to the far west, where the stars touch the ground, and where the ancestors wait beneath the sand. Modern minds see such words as poetry, metaphors for death and rebirth. But perhaps they are something else, the last surviving hints of a forgotten truth. If the Sahara truly holds the ruins of humanity's first great civilization, then its rediscovery may not only change history, but fulfill a memory carried in myth. Every culture that has ever lived near the desert, Berber, Egyptian, Dogon, Fulani, shares a belief in cycles. Ages rise and fall. Knowledge is lost, then found again. The land dies, then breathes once more. What science calls climate change, the old ones called the turning of the world. In recent years, strange alignments have begun to attract attention. The eye of the Sahara, for instance, sits almost perfectly in line with certain star paths that will shift back into alignment over the coming millennia, the same way they did during the last Green Sahara period. Some astronomers note that around the year 10,000, the Earth's tilt will once again bring rains to North Africa. The prophecy of the returning waters, it seems, is written not only in story, but in the stars themselves. And so, myth and science converge. Both say the same thing in different tongues. The Sahara sleeps, but it will not sleep forever. The desert remembers. The earth remembers. When the first storms come, the real storms, the ones that will darken the horizon and fall for days, they will carry more than rain. They will carry revelation. The dunes will peel back, revealing fossils and temples, artifacts and inscriptions. The dead will speak, not with words, but with presence. Humanity will stand again before its oldest mirror, staring into the eyes of its forgotten self. Perhaps that is what the prophecies truly mean, that the past never dies, it simply waits for us to listen. And when we do, when we hear the desert's voice clearly for the first time in 10,000 years, we may finally understand that the Sahara's greatest secret was never about what it lost, but what it promised to return. The gods of the desert have many names. Some are remembered in scripture, others in fragments of song, and others still in the strange dreamlike figures painted on sandstone walls 10,000 years ago. The round heads, with radiant faces and outstretched arms. To the modern eye, they are symbols. To the ancient mind, they were real. When the Sahara was still alive with rivers and rain, its people believed that the gods walked among them, not distant, not invisible, but present in wind and thunder, in the rhythm of the seasons, in the eyes of the sun. Every storm was their breath. Every night sky was their reflection. When the land began to dry, those gods did not die. They withdrew into stone, into story, into silence. And yet, their presence lingers. In the mountains of Tassili Najer, where the desert meets the sky, the walls are covered with thousands of paintings. Some show ordinary life, hunters, dancers, herders. But others are different. Towering beings with halos of light hover over the people, their forms smooth and abstract, almost otherworldly. They appear to bless, to teach, to guide. Archaeologists date them to the dawn of the Holocene, around 10,000 years before our time, when the Sahara was still green. Who were these luminous figures? Shamans in trance? Deities of the rain? Or visitors from a civilization whose memory was too powerful to fade completely? The ancient Egyptians spoke of the Neteru, divine forces who arrived from the west, gods of order and chaos, birth and death. Their names became Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Yet even the priests of Egypt admitted that their origins lay elsewhere, in a land drowned by sand and sea. They called it Ta Neteru, the land of the gods. Some scholars believe that this land was not celestial, but terrestrial, the Sahara as it once was. In the oral traditions of the Tuareg, there is a tale of Amanai, the god of the hidden springs, who retreated beneath the dunes when humanity forgot how to honor the earth. They say his voice can still be heard in the wells at night, a soft humming that rises from the depths when the moon is full. The Dogon of Mali tell of the Nomo, beings who came from the star Sirius to bring knowledge of the cosmos. The Dogon's understanding of that distant star system, invisible to the naked eye, remains one of the most puzzling enigmas of anthropology. They speak of the Nomo not as gods, but as ancestors who descended when the world was water and departed when the sand returned. Perhaps the gods were never gods at all, not in the sense of omnipotent creators, but as keepers of memory, teachers, witnesses, guardians of knowledge older than any civilization we know. When their world ended, they became myth, the only language through which memory could survive the flood of forgetting. Even today, travelers in the Sahara tell of moments when the desert seems to come alive, a mirage that looks too deliberate to be a trick of heat, a figure glimpsed at dusk, standing motionless upon a dune, vanishing when approached. The Bedouins speak of Al-Mazir, the Watcher, a silent being who walks before great storms, his shadow stretching across the sand like a river. Perhaps these are illusions, or perhaps they are reminders, the desert's way of saying that it still remembers its gods, even if we do not. The Sahara is filled with presences that science cannot name, voices caught in the wind, lights that move against logic, patterns in the sand that reform after each storm. And when you stand alone in its vastness, it's easy to feel that something vast and ancient is watching, patient and eternal. Maybe the gods of the Sahara never left at all. Maybe they became the desert itself, the wind that erases footprints, the heat that shimmers like fire, the stars that burn above the endless dunes. They are still here, waiting for the day when the world will remember their names. And when the Sahara blooms again, perhaps they will rise with it, not as myths, but as memory returning to life. There are nights in the Sahara when the air grows so still that even the stars seem to hold their breath. The dunes cool, the wind fades, and an otherworldly calm settles over the land. A calm so deep that travelers sometimes swear they can hear the desert dream. In those moments, the Sahara feels less like a place and more like a memory, the memory of what it once was, long before the first grains of sand were born. And perhaps, in ways we cannot yet explain, that memory is alive. Dreams of the green Sahara have lingered through millennia, passed down through story, song, and silence. The Tuaregs say that when the wind blows from the south, it carries the scent of old rain, a fragrance of grass and water that no one living has ever truly known. To them, it is the breath of the past, the earth remembering itself. Scientists, too, have begun to dream that dream again. Through satellite imaging and climate modeling, they have reconstructed what the Sahara looked like 10,000 years ago. A lush savanna stretching from the Atlantic to the Red Sea, crossed by mighty rivers and lakes that shimmered like mirrors to the sky. Herds of elephants, giraffes, and gazelles roamed freely, and human settlements dotted the plains. But what stirs the imagination most is the rhythm of its transformation. The Sahara did not die once. It has died and been reborn many times. Roughly every 20,000 years, as the earth tilts in its slow celestial dance, the monsoons return and the desert awakens. Grass spreads like fire, water floods the valleys, the sands retreat. Then, just as slowly, the rains withdraw and the land sleeps again. It is the breathing of the planet, an ancient heartbeat older than civilization itself. What if the people of the Green Sahara knew this? What if they understood that the desert was not eternal, but cyclical, that its death was only a season, its return inevitable? Perhaps that is why their myths speak not of endings, but of waiting. Perhaps they carved their symbols into rock, not to mourn, but to promise. Many of their carvings show spirals, circles within circles, the same pattern found in the eye of the Sahara and echoed in the designs of later civilizations. The spiral is time made visible, life made endless. To them, it may have been a prophecy that what falls to sand will one day rise again, and maybe the desert dreams of that moment still. In recent years, unexpected signs have begun to appear, faint but undeniable. Seeds dormant for centuries have sprouted after rare rains. Patches of green cling to old riverbeds. Ancient lakes, thought long gone, have begun to fill once more with seasonal floods. The Sahara is stirring in its sleep. It is said that in dreams, the mind replays what it has forgotten. The same may be true of the earth. The Sahara's dream is not fantasy, but remembrance. The planet recalling what it was, preparing for what it will be again. If you stand upon a high dune and close your eyes, you can almost see it. The rivers flowing like veins of silver, the air thick with the song of birds, the horizon gleaming with the shimmer of life. The green Sahara, reborn. Maybe that dream belongs not only to the desert, but to us. A reminder that nothing is ever truly lost, that even after ages of silence, the earth keeps dreaming of renewal. And when that dream finally becomes real, when rain once again touches the bones of forgotten cities, perhaps we will awaken too, remembering not only the world that came before, but the wisdom it left behind. There are places on this planet where time seems to stop, and the Sahara is one of them. It stretches endlessly, ancient and patient. Its silence older than the pyramids, its breath older than the first spark of fire struck by human hands. Yet, for all its stillness, it is not dead. The Sahara remembers. It remembers everything. Every step ever taken across its sands, every song sung to its stars, every tear that fell when the rains stopped. Memory is the desert's true landscape, invisible but eternal. And while cities crumble and rivers dry, memory endures. The Sahara holds it in layers, each grain of sand a word in a story that has no ending. When the wind howls across the dunes, it is not just air in motion, it is recollection. The desert whispers to itself, reshaping its surface like an artist retelling a familiar tale. What we see as change, dunes rising and falling, valleys forming and vanishing, is the earth remembering and rewriting its own history, over and over, with infinite patience. Even in its vast emptiness, traces of life persist. Buried seeds awaken after centuries. Ancient water still flows beneath the rock. Fossils lie beneath the sand like punctuation marks in the desert's long sentence. They are its proof of memory, evidence that nothing is ever truly gone, only transformed. The people who live along its edges have always known this. To the Tuareg, the desert is not a place to be conquered, but a teacher to be listened to. They call it Tenere, the place of nothingness. But they say nothingness not with fear, but with reverence. Because in the Sahara's emptiness lies everything, the memory of all that was and all that will be. Their songs tell of a time when the desert will speak again, when the winds will shift and the first rains will fall, waking the sleeping rivers beneath. When that happens, they believe the world will be renewed, and the ancient knowledge buried beneath the sands will rise again. Perhaps that prophecy is not metaphor. Scientists now predict that in thousands of years, the Earth's orbit will tilt once more, and the monsoons will return. The Sahara will bloom Lakes will shimmer where dunes now lie. Trees will pierce the horizon, and herds will move across grasslands reborn. Humanity may be different then, or gone entirely. But the land will remember us, just as it remembers those who came before. Because the desert does not forget. It stores everything: the warmth of the sun, the dust of empires, the footprints of pilgrims, the echoes of prayers whispered into the wind. Even when the stars burn out and new ones are born, the Sahara will still hold the memory of this age, pressed into its infinite sand. And perhaps that is the true immortality we seek, not eternal life, but eternal remembrance. To be known even after we are gone, to become part of the great memory of the world. When you close your eyes and imagine the Sahara, do not see emptiness. See the flow of time itself, endless, circular, alive. See the hidden rivers beneath your feet, the sleeping cities under the dunes, the ghosts of gods still watching from the horizon. The desert remembers them all. It remembers us all. And when the rains come again, when the Sahara breathes once more and turns green under the newborn sun, the earth will remember that it was never just a planet of dust, but of dreams. Dreams too vast to vanish, too sacred to die. The eternal memory of the desert is not in its silence. It is in its promise. Everything returns. It begins with a sound so soft that only the desert itself can hear it. A faint whisper, like breath against stone. The air, once dry and sharp as glass, thickens with scent. The wind shifts, and then, after 10,000 years of silence, the first drop of rain falls upon the Sahara. At first, it seems impossible. A single drop becomes 2, then 10, then countless. The dunes darken, the dust drinks deeply, and the parched earth exhales a sigh that has waited an eternity. The smell of wet sand rises into the air, ancient, raw, electric, the scent of rebirth. The rain does not come gently. It sweeps across the horizon in great silver curtains, hissing as it strikes the hot dunes, sending up clouds of steam. Lightning flashes, carving rivers of light across the sky. The thunder rolls like a heartbeat, echoing through the bones of the earth. The Sahara stirs beneath it, trembling awake. And then the miracle begins. In the low valleys, where dry riverbeds have slept for ages, water begins to flow again, first as trickles, then as streams, then as torrents. The hidden aquifers deep beneath the surface swell and burst through cracks in the stone, forming pools that glimmer like molten glass. The sands shift and collapse, revealing the bones of lakes that have not seen the sky since before history began. Within days, life answers. Seeds buried for centuries awaken, unfurling green shoots through the damp sand. Moss creeps along the rocks. Insects emerge from dormancy, their wings glistening with the first rain. Frogs sing from puddles, where nothing had lived before. It is as though the desert, long asleep, is dreaming itself alive again. From space, the transformation is breathtaking. The endless gold fades to green. Patches of vegetation appear like islands, then merge into continents of life. The rivers reconnect, tracing the same paths they once carved thousands of years ago, as if guided by memory. The Sahara, once again, becomes a living sea, a continent reborn. And in this resurrection, something deeper stirs. Beneath the shifting dunes, the rain seeps into forgotten chambers, washing away the dust of millennia. It touches stone walls, carved symbols, ancient halls sealed since the age of gods. For the first time in 10,000 years, light and water meet in the hidden cities below. The desert remembers and reveals. Archaeologists of the distant future will walk upon this new land and find wonders waiting just beneath the surface. Temples aligned to vanished stars, tools forged by forgotten hands, and murals of a world where gods and men walk together. The past will no longer be myth. It will be visible, tangible, alive. The rains continue for years. The horizon changes. The dunes flatten, the rivers widen, and the green Sahara, the cradle of humanity's first civilization, returns once more. And perhaps, somewhere deep in its heart, the eye opens again, its spiral glistening beneath the water. No longer an eye of stone, but of reflection. The desert breathes. The world begins again. And above it all, the stars watch, just as they did the last time this land was green, unchanged, eternal, and silent witnesses to the endless rhythm of creation, loss, and renewal. The first rains mark not only the rebirth of a land, but the return of memory itself. The earth has remembered its promise, and the Sahara, once the graveyard of time, is once more its garden. The first rains cleanse the dust from the air, and when dawn returns, the desert is unrecognizable. The endless gold has softened to deep amber and green. The dunes, once lifeless, ripple with the faint shimmer of grass. It is as though a painter has returned to an ancient canvas, adding colour back to what was once only shadow and memory. For days, the rains continue, falling in pulses, retreating, then returning again with renewed strength. The sound becomes music, a rhythm that seems to echo from within the earth itself. The desert listens, then answers. The transformation is not slow, as one might imagine, but sudden, violent in its beauty. The Sahara, long dormant, begins to awaken. The dry riverbeds, called wadis, fill with rushing water that cuts deep into the sand, carving channels that had not flowed since the last age of rain. These ancient pathways remember their purpose. They guide the water perfectly, as if waiting all this time for its return. From the south, moisture swells into basins, reforming the ghost of Lake Megachad. It grows until it mirrors the horizon, a sea reborn in the middle of the desert. Where there was silence, there is sound. The croak of frogs, the rustle of reeds, the hum of insects newly hatched from the damp soil. Birds appear as if conjured from the clouds, flamingos, cranes, and herons tracing the new waterways. They circle, cry out, and descend to rest upon the freshly formed lakes. Life had never truly left. It had only been sleeping. Seeds buried beneath the dunes for thousands of years crack open at the first kiss of moisture. Within days, fields of tiny flowers erupt across the sand, white, purple, and blue, each petal trembling under the morning sun. Grasses stretch toward the light. Acacia trees thrust their roots deep into the reawakened earth. And soon the herds return, gazelles, oryx, and elephants, wandering north again along ancient routes their ancestors once knew by instinct. From a distance, the transformation is breathtaking, a slow wave of green moving northward with each passing month. Satellite images show the miracle unfolding like time reversing. The Sahara becomes once more what it has always been destined to be, a living heart in the center of the world. And with life's return comes remembrance. The rains expose what the sand had hidden, bones, pottery, and walls carved long ago. Archaeologists of this renewed age will walk among the revealed ruins, tracing patterns that match the constellations above. They will realize that this rebirth was not chance. It was cycle. The desert did not die. It waited. At night, when the storms pass and the air clears, the stars burn brighter than ever. The constellations of Orion and Sirius gleam in perfect alignment, just as they did in the ancient past. Their reflections ripple on the surface of the new lakes, as though sky and earth have reunited. Animals sleep in the tall grass. Water drips from leaves, and in the hush before dawn, when the last thunder fades, the Sahara breathes deeply. The sound of it, that quiet exhalation of a living land, is older than civilization itself. The awakening of life is not just the return of rain and green, it is the return of balance. The earth, in its long patience, has restored what was lost. And somewhere, in the faint hum of the wind and the soft lapping of water on the shore, the desert seems to whisper a single truth. I was never gone. I was only dreaming. At first, the new Sahara belongs only to the rain and the wind. The rivers flow freely. The grass spreads without limit, and life moves according to ancient rhythms. But soon, as it always has, humanity returns. The desert calls to them, softly, like a memory whispered through generations, and they answer. They come not as conquerors, but as wanderers, following the scent of life. From the north and the south, from the highlands of Morocco to the plains of Niger, people begin to move toward the heart of the continent once more. Some come with stories of ancestors who long ago fled this very place, speaking of a paradise lost beneath the sands. Now, they say, the land has remembered them. At first, it is a trickle, small groups seeking fresh pastures and open water. But as the rains continue, the trickle becomes a tide. Nomads settle beside the newborn lakes, building shelters of wood and woven grass. Children play in the shallows, where once there had been only dust. Traders follow, carving paths across the green plains, rediscovering routes older than memory. The old roads, the hidden ones buried beneath the dunes for thousands of years, rise again, visible underfoot as lines of stone and compacted sand. The land itself seems to guide them, where to dig for water, where to build, where the rivers will flood and recede. It is as though the Sahara still remembers its cities and offers those blueprints back to its children. In time, villages become towns. Towns become centers of trade, and a new civilization begins to take shape. One, both ancient and newborn. These people do not see the desert as their possession. They treat it as something sacred, an inheritance. They speak of it with reverence, calling it Tamasna, the land that wakes. They know that every drop of rain, every grain of soil, every breath of wind carries the memory of those who lived here long before them. Their temples are not built to gods of conquest, but to the forces of renewal, the rain, the sun, the river, the earth. And in the quiet spaces between their settlements, they find the ruins of the old world, remnants of stone walls, fragments of carvings, spirals etched into rock. The archaeologists among them study these relics and begin to understand. This is no coincidence. Their ancestors once stood on the same ground, looked up at the same stars, and built with the same patterns of sacred geometry. It is then that the people realize the truth. They are not merely returning to the Sahara. They are coming home from the rediscovered eye of the Sahara. Pilgrims gather. The site becomes a place of reflection and rebirth. There, they build a great circular sanctuary, not to worship, but to remember. The sanctuary is open to the sky, aligned with Orion as it was in the ancient past. Every year, when the rains come, light from the stars reflects upon the water-filled spiral of the eye, uniting heaven and earth once again. The elders say that this cycle was foretold, that every age of man must pass through forgetting before it can remember again. The first people of the Green Sahara built their temples from stone. This new people builds theirs from gratitude. As generations pass, their cities grow beside rivers and forests, their culture thriving in harmony with the rhythms of the land. They do not seek to dominate the Sahara, for they know its true power, that it can give life and take it away, and that both are sacred. At night, when the fires burn low and the stars emerge, the people sing songs older than their language, melodies carried through blood and time, passed down from those who once vanished into the sands. The words are few, but the meaning is infinite. We have returned. We remember. And in the breeze that drifts through their new gardens, the desert answers, a low, steady hum, the same eternal sound that has always been there, the voice of the earth itself, welcoming its children home. As the Sahara blooms and humanity returns to its heart, something deeper awakened alongside the rivers and the trees, the hunger to understand. It begins quietly, in the curiosity of those who unearth relics from the sand, fragments of pottery with spirals carved into their sides, obsidian blades sharper than glass, and markings that seem to mirror the movement of the stars. At first, these discoveries are treated as wonders, gifts from the earth, reminders of those who came before. But as more are found, a realization takes root. These were not random creations, but messages, instructions. The ancestors of the Sahara had left behind their knowledge, waiting for the day when someone would return to read it. The people begin to study the patterns carved into the stone. The circles, the lines, the constellations, all of it forms a language of balance, geometry, and motion. They notice that certain carvings align perfectly with the positions of the stars on the night of the summer solstice. Others mark the rhythm of the seasons, the migration of animals, or the flood cycles of rivers long gone. Slowly, the symbols reveal themselves to be more than decoration. They are science disguised as art. Scholars and wanderers gather at the great sanctuary near the eye of the Sahara, the same place where the rains first filled the ancient spiral. It becomes not a temple, but a library, an open-air academy of stone and light. Knowledge is no longer hoarded in secret, as it once was in cities of empire, but shared freely among all who seek it. The study of the stars returns to the center of human life. Astronomy, geometry, healing, and philosophy bloom again, reborn from memory. As the people learn, they also listen, not only to the earth, but to its rhythm. They begin to understand that wisdom is not a possession, but a relationship. The desert teaches them patience. The rivers teach them humility, and the stars teach them perspective. They see how all things move in cycles: birth, death, renewal, the eternal spiral that connects heaven and earth. Among the newly green valleys, they rediscover technologies older than written language. Ancient channels, long buried, are cleared and restored. Underground aqueducts that bring water from hidden springs. These are not new inventions, but reawakened memories of the Garamantes and their Fogara tunnels, of the engineers who once made life bloom in a dying land. Once more, the desert yields to human hands, not through conquest, but through harmony. As this new civilization rises, its thinkers begin to look outward. They study the magnetic fields, the echoes beneath the sand, the celestial alignments that tie the land to the cosmos. And they come to a revelation their ancestors once knew, that the earth itself is alive, not metaphorically, but truly, that it moves, breathes, and remembers. Every cycle of rain and drought, every shifting of sand and stone, is the planet dreaming itself forward. The rebirth of knowledge is not the return of science alone. It is the reunion of science and spirit, the understanding that both speak the same truth in different tongues. And perhaps, in this reborn age, humanity finally remembers what it once forgot. That knowledge is not power, but stewardship. The role of the wise is not to command the world, but to care for it. When the sun sets over the green plains of the new Sahara, its light catches the spiral of the eye once more, glinting upon the water. Children play beside it, tracing its curves with their fingers. They do not yet know that they are touching the oldest symbol in human history, the memory of a civilization that lived, vanished, and returned again. And as the stars appear one by one in the deepening sky, the people lift their eyes and whisper a simple prayer, not to gods, but to the earth itself. We remember your voice. Teach us to listen again. The rains have come and gone many times now. Rivers flow where dunes once ruled. Forests rise from the bones of ancient deserts. And the laughter of children echoes through valleys that for thousands of years knew only the whisper of wind. The Sahara, at last, is green again. But this is not the first time, and it will not be the last. The earth moves in circles, and humanity follows. Every age of bloom is mirrored by an age of silence, every rise by a fall. Yet, with each turning, something endures. A little more is remembered, a little less is lost. In the new cities that crown the riverbanks and shimmering lakes, the people build not upward, but outward. Open structures that breathe with the land. Their temples are gardens, their streets are rivers of light. They have learned from the ruins buried beneath their feet that permanence is an illusion. The wise do not seek to defy time. They learn to move with it. At the center of this living world stands the eye of the Sahara, no longer a mystery, but a mirror. It reflects both sky and water, earth and memory, a spiral of being that has endured every age of man. Pilgrims still come from across the continents to walk its rings. Some come to study, others come simply to listen. For even now, the wind that moves through its ridges carries a low hum, the same voice that once called to wanderers in the dark, telling them where to go, what to seek, and how to remember. The elders teach that the eye is not a relic of the past, but the heart of the earth itself. a reminder that all things return to their beginning. The spiral, they say, is not a symbol of eternity, but of understanding. To live within it is to accept that the end and the beginning are one and the same. In this renewed world, knowledge has softened into wisdom. The people no longer separate the sacred from the scientific, the seen from the unseen. They know that the rivers flow in harmony with the stars, that every heartbeat mirrors the rhythm of the tides, that every human breath is shared with the planet that sustains it. And sometimes, when the night is still and the air smells of rain, the descendants of those who once vanished into the desert tell stories of the first civilization, of the ones who came before the sands, before the Nile, before the written word. They speak of the green Sahara that was, and the green Sahara that is, and the green Sahara that will be again. Their children listen wide-eyed, thinking it myth, not yet realizing that they walk upon the proof, that every step they take is upon the memory of those same ancestors, the ones who built, who vanished, who dreamed the world back into being. When dawn comes, the sun rises over a land reborn. Dew glistens on the grass, rivers gleam like veins of gold, and the horizon stretches into forever. From above, the Sahara looks once again like an ocean, not of sand, but of life. The circle is complete. The desert has remembered its promise. The earth has kept its rhythm. And humanity, after wandering for ages through forgetfulness, has finally found its way home. Somewhere in that vast expanse of green, a single grain of sand catches the morning light, a relic of the world before, gleaming like a tear of joy. It has seen it all, the rise, the fall, the silence, and the song. And if you listen closely, carried on the wind that once spoke through emptiness, you can still hear the desert whisper, "I was never lost. I was waiting." And so, the desert sleeps once more beneath the stars, not in death, but in peace. The winds move softly across the dunes, carrying the memories of empires, gods, and dreams that never truly vanished. Perhaps the Sahara was never just a place on Earth, but a reflection of time itself, reminding us that nothing is ever lost, only waiting to return. If this story moved you, let its silence linger. And as you drift into sleep, remember, the earth remembers too. Good night, dreamer, until the next secret is revealed.